Seth, your latest piece, which Facebook blocked, didn't allow you to post, and has taken social media by storm, about invasion in the forest, which traces politically exposed persons, including at the very heart of the presidency. And the mayor of Kumasi, their companies. What motivated that kind of research work? Please unmute your mic.
All right. Thank you, Samson, for having me. So during the latter part of last year, we read some reports that some mining companies have been granted concessions in forest reserves. Well, at the time, it sounded normal because there are a few companies that have been granted concessions in mining forest reserves in the past. For instance, the General Paper Forest Reserves, which Newmont mines, it generated a lot of controversy. So we thought, well, it's within the scope of the law. And then we heard that the list included Hakum National Park. Well, that's quite shocking because Hakum is one of the most visited tourist sites. If you are going to turn it into a mining site, it will be problematic. We didn't have a full grasp of the issue, so we visited Rocha Ghana to understand exactly what was going on. I went there with my colleague, Edmond Ajimambuatin. So they told us that the basis, the trigger for this was a new law, Environmental Protection, Mining in Forest Reserves Regulation, passed in November 2022. And their fear was that this would cause further damage that we are already struggling to deal with from Galamsey. They told us that there are two types of forest reserves, production forest reserves and non-production forest reserves. And even for the production forest reserves, where some activity takes place, it's just, if you take those forest reserves, it's just 2% of those reserves that you can touch for farming, mining, timber harvesting, etc. You can't go beyond it. Then they also told us that for the non-production forest reserve, which includes globally significant biodiversity areas, you can't touch them because they are part of our international commitments. And if you heard our president,
because the protection,
and natural resources minister,
Seth, let me state this: because the protection those forests give is not only local protection, but it is needed for the entire survival of the world. That's why they are globally significant biodiversity areas. Okay, let's go on.
Yes, they are part of the commitment we made to the world that will contribute our forests to human survival. And our president, if you heard the president talking about we are contributing to biodiversity, we are protecting our forest reserve. You are using these forest reserves as a bargaining chip for the UN, our share of the UN's loss and damage fund. So it was rather interesting. But Arocha actually showed us proof at the time that at least 3 of those forest reserves have been given out concessions have been given in those forest reserves. The Draw River Forest Reserve, Boing Tano, Area, and then Yon South. Now, we went looking into the law, exactly what does the law say. And we saw in Regulation 3 that there is a provision that allows the president to give a written consent for these forest reserves to be mined in the national interest. I mean, what can be national interest in destroying a forest reserve that we promise the world that we will not touch? So basically, this was the trigger.
Yes, and what did you find? What did you find?
So what we did is to go back to the Minerals Commission website and look for all the mining companies that applied for concession from June 2022, because that was the time the law went to Parliament. and got gazetted in July, and then eventually got passed in November 2022. So we listed all those companies out and then sent the list to the Office of Registrar of Companies to find the names behind these companies.
The beneficial owners.
Now, say that again.
The beneficial owners of those companies.
The beneficial owners, the shareholders, the directors, etc. It would take the ORC more than 4 months to respond. I mean, the number of times we track there, the amount of money we spent on transport is more than what we spent on getting the information, which cost about 35 cedis per company search. Then we began to see, when we got the list, we began to see a trend that people, political office holders that ordinarily you would be surprised to find on such a list. For instance, Mr. Sampine. Mr. Sampine's company, Sam and Jan Limited, is on that list. The company applied for a concession in the Odan River Forest Reserve in the Ashanti region and was granted. We found he owns this company with a Kumasi-based lawyer, Ohini Amankwajan, who is also the lawyer for the Ghana the GIADEC, our company, what's the name? The Ghana Integrated Iron and Steel Development Corporation.
That's right.
Yes. Then we found Chairman Wutumi's company limited. Initially, what's his name? Erastus a few minutes ago mentioned what Chairman Wutumi's company Akunta was doing in the Tanondubiri Forest Reserve. At the time they applied for this concession, they were not given the rights. This was on August 25th, 2022. They were not given the right to mine, but the company went ahead to mine with impunity, as Erastus mentioned. Then we found another interesting trend. There is the Joabin constituency parliamentary candidates of the MPP. He owns two companies, FDA Mining Limited and DML. DML is a consultancy company. And so we actually, when you look at the Minerals Commission website, it states contact person. So we sought to find out from the Minerals Commission, Mr. Isi, I'm happy he's here. We asked him, what does a contact person mean? And he said that they are consultants. So they more or less serve like the middle person between the Minerals Commission and the company. We found that at least 15 companies were connected to him. And 4 of these companies have been granted the concessions in forest reserves. His own company, FJ, also has a concession. Now, something very interesting we found on this GML website. It says that we have established key relationships with upper management at the Ghana Minerals Commission. These relationships have been instrumental in securing and operating concessions in the country's forest reserves. I mean, that's quite interesting.
To say they are the go-to consultants if you want to mine in the forest.
They are the go-to people, and that they have relations with the upper management of the Minerals Commission, which facilitates the granting of concessions to them.
It can be mere boasting, but as you say, they have the results to show for it.
Exactly. Then we also found that a Chinese company, Unipower Mining Limited, also has a concession. Now, we asked a former Minerals Commission boss, Mr. Tony Oben, to explain to us if, for instance, a company registers as a mining service provider, can it receive a concession on its own to mine? And he said if the object of registration of the company, the purpose of registration of the company was for providing mining services, then no. But Unipower has quite a number of concessions apart from the one we saw in the forest reserve. Then we discovered some very interesting names. Solomon Goze, Ryan Goze, and Cynthia Perpetua Aguada. Between these three people, they have about 6 companies. Kingspep, Limespec Mining, Hapic, Rigo SF Globe Mining Limited, and the Nana Ansar Resources, which is now Lotus Impact. And all 4 of these companies have received concessions in the forest. Now, there was a very interesting story we saw.
Do that very quickly for me, because I needed you and Erastus to give us just a bit of this background about the commitment to fighting the Galamsey and ending it, so that my guests can now come in and help us. Of course, we have the Minerals Commission's boss also joining us. They will take a number of questions. Abu Jinapo will also take some questions. Yes, so quickly go to the end of your story for us.
So we also found that the DC for Wasa East and the MPP Women Organizer with 2 other people have applied for concession in the Subri River. Now, the most interesting thing about this one is that the company registered in July 3rd. By July 11th, their application, they put in an application, and that application has been forwarded to the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. Now, the Minister of Lands and Natural Resources told Parliament in February last year that exploration activity, recognizance, and prospecting applications will not be accepted. So we found it quite curious that the Minerals Commission will forward this application to the ministry. And then we also found that another company, Rocha Ghana Limited, with shareholders bearing names similar, emphasis on similar, to a presidential staffer who is also the aspiring MP for Granda South on the MPP ticket. And then the deputy ambassador to Turkey, Faisal Ahmed Meriga, again, emphasis on names similar to them, similar to theirs. So that's what we found, Samson.
What's the response been so far, quickly?
Well, the response has been
in these cases, and as you emphasize in your story, yes, they are doing legitimate mining, except you find some issues of moral conflict with some of the individuals behind the companies, including Sampine, who was leading the crusade for greening, the community, and you can't marry that with, his company being in a forest and mining. What's been the response so far?
Say that again.
What's been the response in a minute?
Oh, the response has been fantastic. The public uproar that greeted this story should obviously send a signal to our leaders that we cannot allow this law to continue to hold. It's a terrible law. It's a bad law. It will further deplete our forest reserves and compromise our country's biodiversity. We must not allow it to stand. If we must do anything, we must repeal it immediately. I'm happy that the minority have indicated their position, that they will have it repealed. But I'm also curious about how the LI goes to Parliament, goes to the Committee on Mines and Energy, and nobody in that committee detected that there's everything wrong with it. I'm surprised. They allow it to pass.
Okay. We'll ask the experts, but your suggestion is that there should not be mining in these areas, but the experts will tell you that there can be mining, responsible mining. I think the fear over the period, as we have heard from Darrell Bosu and the rest from Rocha Ghana, is that it is the breach that is the problem. So even in this small-scale mining situation, we know that licenses have been granted for small-scale mining, and then they turn into something else. Then Galamsey sprouts up. There's a reverend minister who says that the community mining is another name for something else. So yes, just conclude.
Something, I think no matter how we look at this, if you are telling me that you are going to mine responsibly in a GSBA, You've made an international commitment to protecting those forest reserves, and you are telling me that you are going to mine responsibly in it. But the picture clearly showing what is showing on our screens now shows that the moment you open those reserves, other characters also enter. If we are to believe the story Better Land is telling us, it means that other characters also enter those forest reserves, and they are causing the damage we are seeing on our screens. We should not allow it to stand.
Thank you very much, Seth Bokpe, an associate editor at the Fourth Estate with the Media Foundation for West Africa. He's a very good student.